Man will receive at least $25 million from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and the City of Concord as part of a settlement in a civil suit. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Did you know Discover wants everyone to feel special? That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 customer service, as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Limitations apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers got 29 points each from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard last night to hold off Toronto. George scored 15 of his points in the fourth quarter. The Clippers are 11 games over 500 and are 14-3 since December 1st. Earlier Wednesday, the Clippers signed Kawhi to a 3-year extension worth $153 million. The deal will pay Kawhi an average salary of $51 million. The Lakers are at home tonight against Phoenix, 7 p.m. tip-off on TNT. USC's men's basketball team lost at home last night to Washington State. The Trojans lost by 8. USC freshman Bronny James was scoreless in 15 minutes off the bench. LeBron's son was 0 for 3 from the floor and finished with 1 assist and a turnover. Seattle became the 5th NFL team looking for a new head coach. Pete Carroll was fired Wednesday. The former USC head coach had been with Seattle for 14 years. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
So, what are you doing this Friday morning? How about you come join the KBLA delegation as we make a historic announcement and unveil our climate justice campaign for 2024. We'll be assembled for this major press conference along with LA Mayor Karen Bass, Ben Jealous, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and a host of other public and private leaders who are joining us on this journey to justice, climate justice. We can't think of a better way to kick off the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, linking social justice and climate justice. So, come join us this Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. at the beautiful MLK Memorial Tree Grove at the top of Kenneth Hahn Park off La Cienega. Once again, that's this Friday morning, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. as we take on the task of elevating the climate conversation by amplifying the voices of those who are most impacted by the climate catastrophes we are all witnessing in real time. KBLA delegation, we hope to see you this Friday morning at KBLA Talk 1580. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king.
1, 2, 3, go! I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, but I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will. Yeah. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavissmileyshow.com. That's thetavissmileyshow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast of this program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, a conversation with USC professor Haja Yazdia about how right-wing movements have manipulated the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Her book, a provocative book, is called The Struggle for the People's King. And I believe the text will help us better understand the interplay between history, politics, and race as it relates to MLK and the right wing's efforts to manipulate his words, his witness, his life, and his legacy. That's in our second hour. In our third hour,
I think there are people who'd say, so affirmative action is a way for people of color who are not qualified to get into jobs or maybe schools.
Even during the trials, there was zero evidence that any of those students should not have gotten in on their own talents.
Until 1976, the numbers of students of color in colleges were so low the U.S. government didn't even count them. Today, schools are more diverse, but numbers are still low at the top colleges, the ones that admit less than 25% of their applicants, and produce a quarter of the U.S. Senate, 3/4 of the Supreme Court justices, and the majority of the nation's Fortune 500 CEOs. Even with affirmative action in play, just 7% of students at top colleges are Black, even though twice that many, 14%, are of college age. 15% are Latino, even though their college-age population is 23.4%, the fastest-growing youth demographic in the U.S. McKinsey research on nonprofit colleges found that even with affirmative action, it would take almost 70 years for these institutions' student bodies to reflect the demographics of the U.S. population in terms of the number of historically underrepresented students in each class.
We have so much history behind us as people of color, so much history, like such a strong past. So why would we be put at the same level as somebody whose family has been here for centuries and have benefited off of the harm done to communities of color?
A career conversation in our third hour with Emmy-winning journalist and documentarian Soledad O'Brien about her latest piece on affirmative action that you just heard, and her ongoing work shedding light on untold stories and challenging societal norms through compelling storytelling. An hour with Soledad O'Brien today in Hour 3. But in this first hour today, let's talk politics with our regular contributor, Ruben Navarrete Jr., the most widely read Latino columnist in the nation and the host of the podcast, Ruben in the Center. Ruben, how are you today, sir?
Very good, my brother. Great to be with you again.
I don't know if you heard the clip I just played of Soledad.
Oh yeah, Soledad and I were classmates at Harvard. We're in the same class. You bet.
I forgot. That's right. You and Soledad were in the same class at Harvard. I totally forgot about that. That said, let me just get your quick take before we jump into things I want to talk about. There's a lot to talk about, a lot of trending stuff, and I saw your powerful and provocative piece about Claudine Gay at Harvard. The title alone got my attention. Was the ouster of Harvard's president about race, plagiarism, or anti-Semitism? His answer, yes. Was the ouster of the president, about race, plagiarism, or anti-Semitism? He says all the above, yes. We'll get to that. There's some big news on immigration vis-a-vis Republicans and Democrats. We'll talk about that. But very quickly, give me your take on Latinos and their journey toward higher education in this country.
You know, it's been difficult and long, and Latinos are in this interesting spot where they're neither black nor white. And whenever we see America have a conversation about race, we're usually left out of it, along with Asian Americans. Interestingly enough, California, the largest, most populous state in the country, is 60% Asian and Latino. You put those two groups together. So it's always kind of bizarre that we look at race in a black and white paradigm when clearly California and so much of the country isn't like that anymore. So It's been a really difficult road to get Latinos into higher education and into select and elite colleges. And too often it's been very limiting. Latinos have experienced something that African Americans have also experienced. When Soledad and I were first getting to Harvard in the late 1980s or the mid 1980s, Harvard was very, I think, overly selective in terms of what kind of African Americans and Latino students it accepted. It would take people who had all the goods and the credentials and could have gotten in anywhere and then admit them and then call it affirmative action. So I think of what Gandhi said when they asked him, what do you think of Western civilization? He made a joke out of it and said, I think it'd be a good idea. and that's how I feel. They asked me, what do you think about affirmative action at Harvard? I say, I think it'd be a good idea. When are y'all going to start? I'd love to see it. I've never seen it. So if you have to be 10 times more qualified, class valedictorian and a star athlete and have all the goods, and maybe you come from an upper class background, I used to say about Latinos, if you got the Latinos at Harvard together in a room, and there were not that many, you'd get light skin and no Spanish.
Hold that thought. Light skin and no Spanish. We'll come back to that. point as we continue our dialogue with Ruben Navarrete Jr. We'll jump into some other things in this hour as well. A lot of trending politics to talk about, and we'll do it when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look. And unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So, let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California, once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at a gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event. Or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Ruben Navarrete Jr. coming your way right about now. So, Ruben, we were talking, for those of you who have just tuned in, about the fact that in our third hour today, we'll be talking to Soledad O'Brien. I've known Soledad for years, but not quite as long as Ruben, because Ruben and Soledad were in the same class at Harvard, which I'd forgotten about, but I did know that. And Soledad has a powerful piece coming out on CBS about affirmative action. So much talk about it. We all know what the Supreme Court did to gut it some months ago. She has a pretty powerful piece on affirmative action. Soledad does. We'll talk to her about that today and a career conversation. She's done some pretty good work over the years. I was just thinking last night, Soledad and I years ago moderated one of the presidential debates together. We'll get a flashback on that as we're in the presidential election season. So both Ruben and I have interacted with Soledad over the course of our respective careers, and I look forward again to that dialogue with Soledad today in hour 3. But it's about affirmative action, and you were talking to me about Latinos and their journey, as it were, trying to navigate this world of higher education. And you were making a point about the Latinos at Harvard, and I thought I heard you say something about light-skinned and no Spanish. My friend, one of my friends just texted me. We call those white Tinos.
Right.
I think that. Anyway, take it away, Ruben. Right. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, and don't y'all act like you don't have white black folks in the black community.
That's another conversation for another day. Another day.
I know.
Yeah.
And at Harvard, we're talking about the same thing. Basically, I went to school with people like when I was an undergrad at Yale. When I was at Harvard, you had Terry Cisneros, whose dad was Henry Cisneros.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school with Quincy Jones's daughter. Now, if you admit Quincy Jones's daughter into Harvard, do you put that in the black file or the privileged, accomplished, rich file?
Well, the white file. She's half white. I mean, there are no ways to count it.
Where does it go?
Yeah.
Where does it go? Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, people always, and white folks in particular, whenever they talk about affirmative action, it's always like, to me, fingernails on a chalkboard, because they don't want to admit their privilege. They don't want to admit that life has been easier for, white folks in our professions, for instance, yours and mine, than it has been for you and me. And then they turn around and they somehow say that if the gates have been blown open and anybody can walk into Harvard if you're black or brown. If you look at someone like a frequent guest of yours, our mutual friend Randall Kennedy at Harvard, the Harvard professor who was my professor when I was an undergrad. I took courses from him at the law school, and he's terrific and he's a good friend, and I'm a big fan. If you have someone like Randy Kennedy who went to, I think I have this right, Princeton undergrad, he was a Rhodes Scholar, he went to Yale Law School, okay? And he teaches and has for many years law at Harvard Law School. Now, there may be some dense white folks out there who say that Randy may not have gotten his job if he wasn't black. From my vantage point, if Randall Kennedy had been born white, he wouldn't be teaching law at Harvard. He'd have been president of Harvard. So when you take people who are overqualified, people like Tavis Smiley who are overqualified, people like Ruben Navarrete, overqualified, Soledad O'Brien, overqualified, and we get these opportunities, the last thing I want to hear is somehow that the doors have been blown open. That's not true. All you're doing is rewarding and acknowledging excellence, just like you always have been. The only difference is now some of the excellent folks are black and brown.
So let me ask you a point-blank question. We know, you and I worked together 30 years ago doing radio here in L.A., where I sit right now, as the first black and brown radio team to host a talk radio program in this country. We made history in that regard. So you know my views on affirmative action, and more importantly, you know the views of black America writ large on affirmative action. What is, I never asked you this question in all these years, what is the Latino perspective? I mean, I know you're not a monolith, and black folk aren't a monolith either, but by and large, what do Latinos make of affirmative action? You know what we think of it. What do y'all think of it?
I think that Latinos are ambivalent about affirmative action. They have mixed feelings about it, because if you go to the kids that I grew up with in Sanger, California, the farm town that I grew up in, which is mostly Latino, and you got my childhood friends together, the people we used to hang around with since kindergarten, sixth grade, affirmative action, Tavis, meant nothing to them. It didn't affect their life at all. The people who get hot and bothered in my world over affirmative action are Latinos who went to Harvard Law School, keep getting admitted to these schools, get these contracts, get these jobs. And there is this clear divide in the Latino community based on education and class and zip code and how much money you have and education you've had. And it is very fair to say that the people that I grew up with, who to some degree were left behind by the educational system and didn't benefit from the things that I benefit from, they couldn't care less about affirmative action. And if they're told by white liberals to care about affirmative action, they're going to take offense, because they get up every morning and go to work. They've never felt like they've gotten a break because of their race. And I think that's a very fair criticism. I think African Americans also feel that way. There's one area where African Americans and Latinos agree, and that is we just have a very short amount of patience. And I'm sure Soledad will address this, both in her conversation with you and her documentary and her work. We have a very low patience for white men who play the victim. If you show me one more white male billionaire like Bill Ackman, who, by the way, was also at Harvard with us about the same time. He's, I think, a year or two older than Soledad and I. And I have to hear one more time that somehow he's the victim in all of this. In his campaign to oust President Claudine Gay from Harvard, former president now, I'm going to scream, because I just can't get my head around the idea that somehow there are white men in this world who think that they have had a more difficult time making it in America professionally than you and me.
Yeah. I promise we'll get to the president of Harvard, or former president, in a moment again, and I want to talk about your piece, your provocative piece that I read recently. But I want to ask one more question, actually two questions, in fact, about affirmative action. And there are two sides of the same coin, and they both have to do with Clarence Thomas. who obviously helped lead the charge to gut affirmative action in this most recent Supreme Court decision. He had a lot of help in that regard, but he led the charge on it and has been leading it for 30-some years on the court. That said, how do you respond to the notion that Clarence Thomas and others would advance that while affirmative action for many of us is viewed as a corrective program, that's how I view it, and to your point, only qualified people should be considered in the first place. So it's a corrective. It's a corrective program. And yet there are people like Clarence Thomas and others who make this argument of affirmative action stigmatization, that they feel stigmatized. Now, everybody knows that you mentioned Yale, where Randy Kennedy went to law school. Randy was a guest on this program last week, or earlier this week. I can't recall. So many days. This week, Miles? Last week? I think it was this week. Randy was on earlier this week. Anyway, the point is, you mentioned Yale Law. That's where Clarence Thomas went to law school at Yale Law. And I get the sense, and you read his work or just listen to the guy, he feels stigmatized by having gotten into Yale because of an affirmative action program. Now, he didn't turn Yale down. Let's be clear about that. He didn't turn down admission to Yale, even though he knew he was there on an affirmative action program. But one of the reasons why we see him working so hard, so assiduously to pull up the ladder behind him and to gut affirmative action, as this Supreme Court has just done, is because he personally feels stigmatized by having been an affirmative action entrant, as it were, into Yale Law School. That's a long way of asking whether or not you buy the argument that affirmative action stigmatizes.
I do buy the argument. One of the areas where you and I disagree, and we have over the years, is we have different views on Clarence Thomas.
We do?
He's not my favorite justice, but I don't think he's the villain of the story, as we've laid it out. I think that, or a Latino, for that matter, who is opposed to affirmative action for the same reason of stigmatizing. When Clarence Thomas and other Latino conservatives, for instance, start talking about a white male victim, then they lose me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm going to come after them because that's a fiction. It's make-believe. White men are not being systemically discriminated against by affirmative action. So that's where we part company. But if Clarence Thomas, Shelby Steele, William Julius Wilson, other
Thomas Sowell, all of them. Yeah.
Yes, if they want to make the argument that affirmative action is actually put there by white liberals to hurt black folks and make them dependent on liberalism and stigmatizes them in the process, I'm all here for that. I'm for that. I'll hear that argument. I'll hear arguments from Latinos like Linda Chavez, my old friend Linda Chavez, who has been against affirmative action from the get, and she and I have talked about this. She's very conscious of the fact that she doesn't go to bat for white liberals, white men as the victims of affirmative action, but rather she thinks it's hurting Latinos by lowering standards, by stigmatizing us. And here's one more. We should be very concerned by the fact that teachers unions in this country, which are majority white, and have maintained a system, a K-12 education system, that shortchanges black and brown kids every single day in a state like California, that they oppose efforts to end affirmative action. And I think we should be focusing on what's being done to our young Latino and African-American kids at the K-12 level. And I don't want to just cover all that up and say, tell you what, you failed the kid, but if you let him into UCLA, we'll call it even and we won't speak of it again. No, that's not right. There's something wrong here, okay? There's something wrong here. Black folks who think they're being victimized and brown folks who think they're being victimized, they're half right. They're being victimized, I think, as much by the left as they are by the right.
So we disagree on this. We agree on this part. I don't buy the argument of white male victimhood either. That's obvious. I don't buy that argument. But I also don't buy the argument of stigmatization. And I think you have a hard time making both points. You can't argue that affirmative action stigmatizes on the one hand and then argue that affirmative action on the other hand is a corrective program that only allows folk in who are qualified in the first place. You can't have it both ways. It's either or. And so I don't buy the white male victimhood and I don't buy the stigmatization argument either. That said, watching my time, I want to cover some other stuff here. Back to Clarence Thomas finally on affirmative action. Again, we'll talk to Soledad O'Brien in hour 3 today about a very powerful new documentary she has coming out about affirmative action, given what the Supreme Court has done to gut it. So Soledad again in hour 3. But one final thing about Clarence Thomas. What do you make of, whether you agree or disagree with him, whether he's your favorite guy or not, what do you make of his efforts, given that he got into Yale as an affirmative action entrant, all these decades since, pulling up the ladder of those who would benefit from that same program? You have to call that what it is, Ruben, hypocrisy.
I agree with you. I'm not in favor of that, and I'm not a fan of that. I'm also not a fan, and we can make the argument even stronger on our side by saying the following. Clarence Thomas benefited from affirmative action long after he left Yale. He graduated from a form of affirmative action and preferential treatment when he was capped to replace Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court. Because George H.W. Bush, the president, knew he could not replace this historic figure, this civil rights icon, Thurgood Marshall, a black man with a non-black man. It had to be a black man. And so we know that Clarence Thomas beat out a lot of other white folks for that position because he was black, in the same way that when Donald Trump needed to replace a woman, or decides he's going to put a woman on the court, he goes for Amy Coney Barrett. It's a big lie to think somehow that race and gender don't matter. Some of the same folks who badmouth the practice benefit from it or use it.
Yep. And I'd add one other thing to that. Clarence Thomas didn't just beat out a bunch of other folk. He beat out a bunch of white folk who were more qualified. Let's put that in there. A lot of white folk who were more. He had barely been a judge for 2 days, essentially. Go back and read the record. So he to Ruben's brilliant point, he once again was the recipient of affirmative action. He wants to call it victimization and stigmatization. No, brother, you benefited from affirmative action. It got you into Yale, and years later it got you on the U.S. Supreme Court, and yet you've done everything you can to bastardize, to demonize, and to just annihilate this corrective program called affirmative action. I digress on that point, but Ruben's right. He got there because Bush knew that he had to replace Thurgood Marshall with another African American. And again, there were a whole lot more qualified white folk even. And in this instance, I'm all for qualifications. I would have preferred another white person on the court, more qualified than Clarence Thomas, given what we've gotten for the last 30 years. I digress on that point. Let me start this now. I know I've got 2 minutes. We'll have more time to continue when we come forward. But let's segue straight to where we're headed, and that is, we were talking about Harvard a moment ago. Let's stay on the campus in Cambridge and talk about the ouster of the now former president, Claudine Gay. Your piece is titled, Was the ouster of Harvard's president about race, plagiarism, or anti-Semitism? The answer you put in your headline, yes, all of the above. Get me started, and we'll continue when we come forward in 2 minutes. So go ahead and jump into it.
President Claudine Gay at Harvard lost her job because she failed in it. As Eugene Robinson, my colleague at the Washington Post, said in a column, she failed spectacularly at that congressional hearing by not saying definitively that anti-Semitism did indeed violate Harvard's code of conduct, and making it clear that she was going to protect all of her students, including her Jewish students, by creating a safe campus environment. Now, Gene says that. I say that. A lot of other folks say that. She failed. You have one job as Harvard president, that's to communicate, and she didn't do it effectively. Now, she wasn't alone. Liz McGill, the president then at the time of UPenn, also failed, and she also resigned and was forced to resign. So that said, and I've said that from the beginning, I said that on your show, in fact, right after the hearing. That said, the ouster of Claudine Gay was an ugly breakup. It was not a clean breakup, okay? And it became ugly because of race. And I'm getting a lot of angry mail from white folks who say I'm a racist. And that's not new for me. That's
you should be used to that by now. You're used to that.
I'm used to that by now.
Yeah.
White folks who say I'm a racist. Why do white folks say I'm a racist? Because I say that race had a lot to do with the ouster of Claudine Gay. And you're not allowed to say that.
Hold that thought.
Race
had a lot to do with her ouster, and you're not allowed to say that. You're right. And when we come forward, I want to give you a chance to sort of unpack that. Again, you can find Ruben's column online. He is the most widely read Latino columnist in the nation. That's a big deal, courtesy of his Washington Post piece that is syndicated in newspapers all across the country every week. The title of this one is called, Was the Ouster of Harvard's President About Race, Plagiarism, or Anti-Semitism? Yes. More with our regular contributor, Ruben Navarrete Jr., when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant gravenoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A North Carolina man who was wrongfully accused of a rape is going to receive a massive settlement. Ronnie Long spent more than 4 decades in prison before his conviction was overturned in 2020. One of his attorneys revealed this week that the African-American man will receive at least $25 million from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation and the City of Concord as part of a settlement in a civil suit. We're now learning the TSA has set a new record when it comes to finding guns in carry-on bags. 2 of the top 5 airports for gun seizures were in Texas. Dallas and Houston were behind only Atlanta when it came to arrests. More than 9 out of 10 of the guns seized were loaded. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Did you know Discover wants everyone to feel special? That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 customer service, as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Learn more at discover.com/credit card. Limitations apply.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Clippers got 29 points each from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard last night to hold off Toronto. George scored 15 of his points in the fourth quarter. The Clippers are 11 games over 500 and are 14-3 since December 1st. Earlier Wednesday, the Clippers signed Kawhi to a 3-year extension worth $153 million. The deal will pay Kawhi an average salary of $51 million. The Lakers are at home tonight against Phoenix, 7 p.m. tip-off on TNT. USC's men's basketball team lost at home last night to Washington State. The Trojans lost by 8. USC freshman Bronny James was scoreless in 15 minutes off the bench. LeBron's son was 0 for 3 from the floor and finished with 1 assist and a turnover. Seattle became the 5th NFL team looking for a new head coach. Pete Carroll was fired Wednesday. The former USC head coach had been with Seattle for 14 years. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
Did you know that feeling sluggish or weighed down could be a sign that your digestive system isn't working at its best? Taking Metamucil every day can help. Metamucil fiber powders help promote your daily digestive health using a plant-based fiber called psyllium. The gelling action of this special fiber traps and removes waste so you can feel lighter and more energetic. Metamucil, promoting digestive health for a better you. Learn more at metamucil.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Girl, I have a secret. When I get stressed out, I get sweaty. That's why I use Secret Clinical Antiperspirant. It's like my own secret weapon. For 72 hours, I get Secret's strongest protection against sweat caused by stress, heat, and activity, because you know how crazy life can get. Plus, it's made with advanced odor fighters that don't just cover up smelliness. They help prevent it from happening in the first place. Believe me, if I weren't wearing Secret, I'd be a hot, smelly mess. Thankfully, Secret works.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
What for?
Washington. We love Febrez's new scent. Refresh and energize.
So much we made a song about it.
Granddad, what's good?
Hey there, got us a quarter pounder with cheese and McNuggets.
Wow, haven't had our special McDonald's order in a minute.
Heard your little tic-tac-toe dance didn't get no likes.
Oh man, is Mom telling everybody?
You know she is.
There's a deal for every favorite grandson at McDonald's. Right now, get one favorite like a quarter pounder with cheese or 10-piece chicken McNuggets and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed with our regular contributor in this first hour, Ruben Alvarez Jr., talking about all things political. We just spent a good part of the program in this first hour talking about affirmative action in light of the fact there's a powerful documentary coming out, produced and starring Soledad O'Brien, who we'll talk to in hour 3. And then we segued into how Latinos view affirmative action specifically and how they're being victimized or aided and abetted by corrective programs like affirmative action in higher education. Clearly, Latinos make up a huge slice of the vote and will have a say in the elections this year that will matter in a lot of key races. So their points of view do matter to me and ought to matter to you, given the role they will play politically this time around. And then we found our way into a conversation about affirmative action in Harvard, where we've been matriculated, as did Soledad, for that matter. They were in the same class. We spent some time talking about Harvard, and we continue our dialogue now about the ouster of Claudine Gay, the forced ouster, as the first black woman, the first African-American, second woman to be president of Harvard. And Ruben has written a provocative piece called Was the Ouster of Harvard's President About Race, Plagiarism, or Anti-Semitism? Yes, that's his answer. I want to read just a piece from this column and let Ruben finish the point he was making about whether or not white folk are the only ones who are allowed to bring up the issue of race in dialogues like these. I quote from his column, "It certainly looks like the campaign to oust Gay was orchestrated by white people who didn't want her in that position in the first place, and that some of that may have been about the color of her skin. Speaking of racial nonsense, it's disingenuous for white people to try to have it both ways. They can't advance the racist claim that the only reason the Gay was hired as president is because she's black, and then get offended when some people insist her ouster was about race. I don't understand the rules. Are white people the only ones who can bring up race?" That's a piece of Ruben's most recent column. Ruben, you want to unpack that for me a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I said before that Latinos are neither black nor white, even though we represent about 20% of the country and on its way to 25%. We're often invisible in that context. But there's an area where I'm grateful to be neither black nor white. I'm blessed because I'm able to call out both black folks and white folks on their BS when the occasion occurs. And in this case, it's white folks who deserve to be called out because if you think about it, in their mind, the Claudine Gay story is all about race. When she gets the gig at Harvard, they say it's about race. When the Harvard Corporation decides to keep her on after the disastrous congressional testimony, they say it's all about race. And then when she's forced out, I say, well, what's it about? And they say, well, I know it's not about race, that's for sure. So what happened to the race?
Yeah.
Where did the race go? The race factor just disappeared overnight. Poof. Right? So that's where I think they need to be called out on their BS. And she said that she got a lot of hate mail after her congressional testimony, racial animus. She was called the N-word multiple times. And I was listening to a moderate center road white radio host who said, I can't believe that she got that kind of mail. And I joked, I thought to myself, I need to go on Tavis' show and I need to go listen to Tavis' show because I'll tell you what, Tavis and Ruben have no trouble imagining that she got that kind of mail.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten that kind of mail for many years.
Yeah, mail and death threats on top of that, and it's unconscionable. But that is America for you. You mentioned Bill Ackman's name earlier. And I want to just ask a quick question before I move on. A Harvard classmate of yours, as you mentioned earlier, and he's the hedge fund manager who led this charge to oust her. And in the recent days, we've discovered that his wife plagiarized in her work at MIT. And then he responded by saying, I'm so rich, I'm going to investigate everybody at MIT for the president on down and right. Find out who else plagiarized. I mean, it's petulance, it's pettiness at its worst. That's my read of it. But what do you make of this white guy, Bill Ackman, who's behind all of this drama?
You know, you and I have something else in common, brother. We've both had the occasion to work for billionaires, and I currently work for two of them. And when you're going to have that much money, you can go one of two ways. You can use it for good or you can use it for evil.
Yeah.
And Bill Ackman, unfortunately, is a bully. He's a billionaire bully. And he uses his money in the worst way, and that's to intimidate people, to get people to back off. When MIT, where his wife was a professor, was investigating instances of plagiarism across the board, not just in her case, but in other cases as well, he used his influence and money to get them to keep her name out of it. He used his money to try to get Claudine Gay and successfully got her out of that position. So to my mind, he's the worst kind of rich guy, and that's a bully. And from his vantage point, I find this interesting. In his world, he really doesn't see the white privilege that he's benefited from. In becoming a hedge fund manager, benefiting after he got out of Harvard from investment dollars and VC money and partnerships, he doesn't have to waste a lot of time hearing people say, now it's time to justify yourself. Would you have your current job if you weren't black or brown? And so he was legitimately born on third base. And I guess that the money just brought out the real Bill. And he's been a bully. And it's unfortunate because it doesn't speak well of him or other rich folks.
The sad part is he wasn't just born on third base. He was born on third base and thinks he hit a triple. That's the real problem.
Yeah,
he wasn't just born there, but he thinks that he hit a triple to get there, and that's another issue.
Sure.
Yeah, another issue. I was laughing.
He thinks that if he'd been born a black woman, he'd have gotten further in life.
Yeah, exactly, and that's hilarious. I was laughing. Speaking of hilarity, I was laughing as you were talking about the two of us having worked for billionaires in our career. Indeed, we have. Yeah. It'd be nice wouldn't it be nice to be a billionaire, not just work for a billionaire? Somehow, in the work and witness that you and I have been called to do, I don't think that's in the cards for us. I think we may perennially be working for billionaires. Not sure we're ever going to be in that category, in that club, my friend. Sorry to tell you that.
It's a cautionary tale because you and I have worked for some rich folks where you've seen the money has made them lesser human beings. It just needs to be said. And there are others who have had money and it didn't make them lesser human beings. They're still good people.
Yeah.
And if I could get to a point where I am better off financially, but not becoming like some of these folks, no, thank you. Yeah. Do I want to be like Bill Ackman? No, thank you.
Yeah. Nope, I take your point, and I couldn't agree more on that regard. Let me pivot now. I'm looking at my clock here. I want to spend the rest of our time talking about this particular issue, and we could spend hours just on this. Let me set this up. When we come forward, I'll give you a chance to respond to it. So since you were last on this program, a lot has happened, as you know, on the immigration front. We have talked about this issue for 30 years as friends and media colleagues. But here we are again talking about affirmative action. Why? Because days ago, the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker, took 60 of his Republican friends to the Mexico-U.S. border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and they had a moment there, and that trip was all about embarrassing and squeezing Democrats. That's why they went. Now, the result of that is that Democrats are starting to change their tune on immigration. Here I come with affirmative action again. Immigration. Democrats changing their tune now on immigration. It seems to me that the president ultimately is going to end up signing something on immigration that he might not want to sign, but is going to get forced into signing it anyway. Because if he wants more money for Israel, more money for Ukraine, et cetera, Republicans insist that they attach to whatever bill he's going to sign some movement on immigration. So again, Republicans are up in the ante. Democrats are changing their tune. The president is getting boxed in. We'll let Ruben unpack all of that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good.
Yeah, man.
Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
So, what are you doing this Friday morning? How about you come join the KBLA delegation as we make a historic announcement and unveil our climate justice campaign for 2024. We'll be assembled for this major press conference along with LA Mayor Karen Bass, Ben Jealous, Executive Director of the Sierra Club, and a host of other public and private leaders who are joining us on this journey to justice, climate justice. We can't think of a better way to kick off the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend, linking social justice and climate justice. So, come join us this Friday morning at 10:30 a.m. at the beautiful MLK Memorial Tree Grove at the top of Kenneth Hahn Park off La Cienega. Once again, that's this Friday morning, January 12th at 10:30 a.m. as we take on the task of elevating the climate conversation by amplifying the voices of those who are most impacted by the climate catastrophes we are all witnessing in real time. KBLA delegation, we hope to see you this Friday morning at KBLA Talk 1580. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king. Climate is king.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing to keep the Grinch away from the toy drive.
Who's going to deliver the toys to the kids?
What about me, the Grinch?
No.
Yep, even easier than that.
You steal the presents one time.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Capital One NA, member FDIC. Copyright Dr. Seuss Enterprises. Copyright Turner Entertainment.
Jackson Hewitt has a plan to get your tax refund fast with a buck here, buck there. Here a buck, there a buck, everywhere a buck.
You don't have to wait weeks for your tax refund. Get money sooner with a no-fee refund advance loan at Jackson Hewitt.
On this loan, there's a money today guarantee. E-I-E-I-Do.
Don't settle for chicken feed. Get fast bucks at Jackson Hewitt today. No-fee refund advance loans by Republic Bank offered to eligible clients. Money today guarantee if approved for a loan on a prepaid card. Details at jacksonhewitt.com.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Ruben Navarrete Jr., our regular contributors. So, Ruben, on immigration, the GOP is raising the ante. You saw that spectacle at the border. Democrats are changing their tune, and Biden is getting boxed in. Talk to me.
So I think you're wrong that Biden's going to end up signing a bill he doesn't want to sign.
Okay.
I think he's going to end up signing a bill he wants to sign.
I knew you were going to say that. I've known you too long. I can see that line coming. Okay, go ahead.
The record speaks for itself. Joe Biden, when he was in the Senate, he voted for the Secure Fence Act in 2005, which built fencing and walls along the U.S.-Mexico border. In 1996, even before that, he voted for something called IRA. If you know any immigration attorneys, they will tell you that's the bane of their existence. While written by a Republican, it was signed into law by Bill Clinton, voted for by Joe Biden. It makes it easier to deport folks, harder for them to come back. Joe Biden, despite anything he says, you have to watch what he does and has done in the past. He is one of the biggest immigration restrictionists to ever sit in that chair. He spent 8 years next to Barack Obama, who deported more people than any other president, 3 million people in 8 years. So this fiction that's created by my liberal friends over at the New York Times that somehow poor Joe Biden's going to be forced to sign a tough immigration bill as soon as we don't know how to use Google. Nobody knows how to use Google. But he's not the only one who lies about this. From my vantage point, Tavis, the number one problem with the immigration debate, it is fundamentally dishonest. Republicans lie, Democrats lie. The three lies that I hear from Republicans, that this is not about race. We would be just as worked up if folks were coming from Canada. The second one is somehow immigrants hurt America, when from my vantage point, you have a lot more to worry about a third-generation Mexican-American who thinks like an American and feels entitled than you do from a Mexican immigrant who just wants to work. Third, and I'll apply the same thing to African-Americans, Haitians versus Black Americans, immigrants are not the problem. as you live longer in this country, you start to get the message. It's always a positive message. The last one is you cannot find a Republican anywhere who has the guts to stand up and say that the reason people come is because employers hire them. That every time people want to get tough on illegal immigration, somehow they forget to penalize employers. Even though that's on the books, thanks to the 1986 immigration law, IRCA, those employer sanctions are never enforced. There's tons of loopholes attached to it. And the reason is simple. Employers contribute to political parties and undocumented immigrants don't. So there's three big lies you hear on the Republican side.
Yeah.
What troubles me about the Democratic side, I think you're going to appreciate this, is that while they are pro-choice on abortion, on immigration, they're multiple choice. They are all over the place. Barack Obama tried during 8 years to be simultaneously tough and compassionate. Bill Clinton tried to be tough on the border while blaming Republicans for being too hard on immigrants. Joe Biden has now played his game where he's acting like, you're forcing me to sign something I don't want to force. I don't want to sign. Democrats have taken every position. There was a column recently by David Leonhardt over at the New York Times who takes a position slightly different than yours. His view is that you used to be able to find Democrats being tough on immigration, like the examples I just gave you. But since Trump got to the game, they've been anti-Trump, which means they've been soft on immigration. Your position is they used to be soft on immigration. Now they're going to become tougher to placate the Republicans. You're both right. You and David are both right. The fact is the Democrats are doing everything to please everybody, and it's made a mess.
That's the line of the day so far. I've got 2 hours to go in front of me, but that's a great line, and it's accurate. That Democrats, let's credit Ruben Navarrete Jr. with this line. Democrats are pro-choice on abortion, but multiple choice on immigration. That's a great line, and it'll play, as we say, it'll preach. Pro-choice on abortion, multiple choice on immigration. I love it. When we come forward, I'm not naive in asking this question, but I want to get Ruben's take on it, and that is why and how he believes that a nation of immigrants believes that immigrants are the problem. I mean, think about that. We are a nation of immigrants, and yet we continually, in our political discourse, blame everything on the immigrant. You're listening to Ruben Navarrete Jr. on Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Watch out! You got me!
The galaxy is safe once again.
In the pretend universe, kids play with pretend guns. In the real world, it's up to us to make sure they don't get their hands on a real gun. If you have a gun in the house, keep it locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Stay Housed LA has the resources you need to know your rights and the legal support to back them up. The COVID-19 pandemic has cost people their jobs and livelihoods. This has left an estimated 1/3 of households not being able to make rent and facing losing their homes. This is a fear no one in our community should have to face. You have rights, though, and Stay Housed LA is here to help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and local community and legal service providers. Together, they provide tenants with the information and support needed to exercise their rights so they can remain safely in their homes. Find out more about your rights by participating in a virtual tenant workshop. Get the legal assistance you need. Find additional resources in Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA County for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. That's stayhousedla.org. Or call their hotline at 213-694-0040. We've got your black with a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Ruben Alvarez Jr., here's my exit question with 3 minutes left to go. We are a nation of immigrants. You know the line. Bring me your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe, yearning to be free. Those words etched on the Statue of Liberty. How is it that a nation of immigrants always wants to claim that immigrants are the problem?
It goes all the way back to the founding of the country. It's in our DNA. After you and I stopped doing radio in L.A., you went to Washington, D.C., I went to Phoenix, Arizona, where I worked for the Arizona Republic. I was doing a story one day, and I ran across someone whose job was historian at the INS. There was no ICE back then. Mm-hmm. It was before 9/11. It was the INS. And that woman, her job was to be the historian of that agency. And she started talking to me about what they used to say about Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants, Chinese immigrants, Jewish immigrants. It all sounds like what you say now about Latino immigrants. And so it's in our DNA, unfortunately, dating back to the 1700s when, even before the country was founded, Benjamin Franklin was concerned about Pennsylvania being invaded by Germans and badmouthed the Germans. So, they teach us in grade school, and they did to you in Indiana and me here in California, that the national motto is "De pluribus unum," out of many one. Mm-hmm. It's actually not true. The national motto is, "Hey, there goes the neighborhood." Every single group that comes is viewed as inferior to the groups that are already here. Yeah.
Ruben dropping bars today. I love these lines. He's had a few up. He's had a few up today. It is not e pluribus unum. It is there goes the neighborhood. That's our national motto, and I think he's right about that. Yeah. Let me close with this. I got about a minute and a half to go. It's a big question, broad question, but as you well know, on Monday, the King holiday of all days, this race starts in earnest with the Iowa caucuses, and we could do commentary about Iowa if we had time. We ain't got time for that. But my question is, as you sit right now, looking from here, it's a broad expanse, a long expanse, from here to November. How do you see the Latino vote playing out this year?
Trump has this thing in the bag. He's going to win Iowa and New Hampshire, and not because he deserves to, but because his opponents are just so wretched. If you got a look yesterday at Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis attacking each other, but being careful not to say a negative word about Trump, it's very clear that neither one of them deserves to be the nominee. So in that regard, it's Trump's, and he's going to be the nominee. And ultimately, Latinos are going to face the same choice that all the other Americans face, Biden versus Trump. They're going to see not much difference between Biden's immigration policy and Trump's immigration policy, because Biden took his policy from Trump. And ultimately, I think Latinos are going to shrug, and many of them will vote for Trump. I would be disappointed, but not surprised if he got upwards of near 40% of the Latino vote, which will make it impossible for Biden to win. And you got to remember this. This is not about what Trump's doing right. It has always been about what Democrats are doing wrong. When black folks did not show up to vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, you and I talked about that after the fact. I joked, black folks sent Hillary a message, did you get it? Right? That was not an indictment of black folks. That was an indictment of Hillary Clinton. And we need to stop blaming non-white voters, blacks and browns, for sniffing at the dog food and saying, "No, I don't want to taste that." Yeah,
if we had time, we could debate. And we don't have time. But if we did, we could debate how black folks showed up or didn't for Hillary in 2016. We'd have different arguments on that particular issue. What we would not disagree on is that Hillary made a bunch of mistakes coming down the pike, including not going back to Michigan, where a lot of black folk live, in Detroit, of course.
And be clear, black folks didn't vote for Trump. They did not vote for Trump. They just didn't vote at all.
Yep. Nope. You got a point there. We could debate that, but we won't. But for now, thank you, as always, for your insights. Thank you for dropping these bars in this hour. And I'll talk to you soon, my friend. All the best to you.
Love you, brother. Take care.
Love you back, man. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network A North Carolina man who was wrongfully accused of a rape is going to receive a massive settlement. Ronnie Long spent more than 4 decades in prison before his conviction was overturned as part of a settlement in a civil suit.